guys, today what we are going to be making is a sort of a spin on Bastille soap. This is called Bastille soap, which means it is a soap recipe that has at least 70% olive oil and then one ingredient that's something else. So I wanted to try this because I liked making that Bastille soap that I did a few weeks ago. It was a really nice recipe. I actually like the soap now. I keep it by the kitchen sink. But I wanted something that was just a little bit different, that would be a little bit harder, and it's just fun to use different ingredients, so I thought I would give this a try. So since Bastille soap has to be at least 70% olive oil, I knew I had only a little bit of room for one other ingredient, and I actually tried two different ones, and this one was my favorite. The number one problem with the Bastille soap, well, there's two. The first one is that it takes a really long time to cure because it's all liquid oils, so it just doesn't harden up as fast. And the second problem, and the biggest problem, is that the lather is good. There's a lot of it, but the bubbles are very, very small. You don't get big, bouncy bubbles the way you do with some of my other soap recipes. So the first thing I tried to kind of balance that out was doing a recipe that was 75% olive oil and 25% castor oil. And I should have known that that would have been a really bad idea because castor oil you really shouldn't use at more than 10%. Even 10% is kind of pushing it. And the olive oil was already not sticky, but a liquid oil, and there was nothing hard in there. And then I added the castor oil, which is very sticky. And even though the lather on that was good, it was just too soft, too sticky, and I was not a fan. It was a really soft bar, which was not what I was trying to get. So the next thing I tried was this recipe, and this is olive oil and shea butter, and this one is definitely a winner. So you only need the tiniest amount of shea butter, and it makes a really huge difference in your finished bar, both how fast it comes to trace, how quickly it hardens, and also just the quality of the soap itself. It feels a lot more moisturizing and richer, and it's a really nice bar with only two oils. So even though we could have gone higher with the shea butter, and this still could have been considered a Bastille soap, I really hope I'm saying Bastille correctly, by the way. I wonder if I'm not. Anyway, I could have gone higher with the olive oil with the shea butter percentage, and it still would have been considered a Bastille soap, but I actually wanted to keep it really high in olive oil. So this one is about 92% olive oil, 25 ounces of olive oil, and only 2 ounces of the shea butter. So it's like 8.4% or something like that shea butter. And it actually does make a huge difference. These are both really easy to get your hands on, which is a great thing about this recipe. If you don't want to order from a soap supplier, you really don't have to, because the amount of shea butter you need is so small. It's pretty affordable just to get it on Amazon. And I'll link for you guys the one that I bought. It was like $7, and it'll make multiple batches of this recipe. And then for the olive oil, I just use the Kirkland brand from Costco, which actually, if you can get an olive oil from a soap making supply company, you'll actually save money because those aren't food safe olive oils and they're actually much cheaper. But I didn't want to have a million different kinds of olive oil or 2 different kinds of olive oil in my house, so I just used what I cook with, and it worked out just fine. So our very first step is just going to be to combine our oils and our lye. As always, you want to be really careful when you're working with lye. It is poisonous. You have to be working in a well-ventilated area. You have to make sure you're free of distractions and that you can measure everything carefully. So I'm going to measure out the lye separately and then the water. And then you're going to add the lye into the water, always putting the lye on top of the water and then mixing it. Remembering the saying, snow floats on the lake, as a way to make sure we do that in the right order. So this is going to shoot up in temperature. It's going to become cloudy. This is a point at which you really need to tuck this lye water aside in a safe place where no one is going to knock into it, and let it cool for about an hour. Meanwhile, you are preparing all of the other ingredients. So I am just measuring all of these in one pot. I'm kind of throwing everything in together, the olive oil and the shea butter. The best practice would really be to measure this out separately, so that if you go over on a little bit of one of the oils, it's easier to subtract it without messing up your whole batch. But I am just going to go really slowly and carefully and add this shea butter in a little tiny bit at a time, remembering that we're only using 2 ounces, which is a small amount, and I don't want to be fishing any of it out. And of course, I run out of olive oil in the middle of pouring this. which is a reminder, you should always have extra supplies, because what if I hadn't had this backup olive oil in my basement? I would have been very, very annoyed having to run this recipe through a soap calculator and make a smaller batch. And my lye would have been ruined because I would have had to just toss that and remeasure it because I calculated it for a certain amount. So don't be like me. Make sure you have enough of every ingredient before you get started. So the shea butter does take a while to melt. The olive oil obviously doesn't have to melt, it's liquid, but the shea butter takes a while. So next time what I think I'm gonna do is put the shea butter in the microwave just to like soften it on low for a little bit so it melts faster and I don't have such hot olive oil at the end, because I did have to heat the olive oil up quite a bit to get the shea butter to melt. So I have all of this stuff prepared. We're gonna set it aside, let it cool. This is gonna take an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And while this is going on, I want to get everything else ready. I'm gonna do a really, really light baby pink for this recipe. And you can see in the finished product, it really doesn't come out very pink. So if you want pink color, please add more than I'm using. I never measure out my colorants. I just do a little bit of a pinch, mix it in with some of the melted oils, and then add that in at the end. So this recipe, as written, is gonna fill my bar molds. I have a little cavity set with 10 round soap bars, but you always want to have an extra mold in case there's any overflow. And all soap molds are a little bit different and hold a little bit of a different amount of batter. So you just want to make sure you have an extra one ready to go, so that in case there's any extra, you can just pour it into there. So everything's ready. We're going to pour the lye water into the oil and go ahead and start stick blending. Now, when we made the Bastille soap, it took probably 5 minutes at least of just plain old stick blending for it to come to trace. This one is going to be a little bit faster. This took about 3 to 4 minutes, and then it does start to thicken up. You can see this is still a pretty thin trace. That's just how I like to work. If you prefer a thicker trace, you would keep blending until it looks almost like a thin pudding. Mine is just barely reached trace, and you can see when I lift up my stick blender, a little trail of soap butter rests on top. Now we are going to mix in the fragrance and the color. And I can tell right away this was not enough color, but I'm just going to carry on and keep going. Next time I make it, I'll add a little bit more. Did work out just right, like I said, that it fills it up perfectly, but you do want an extra. Okay, so this one typically will not go through gel phase. You don't need to put it in the freezer. It's not going to misbehave and do a volcano or anything like that. I just leave it out on the counter uncovered for a day, and then I start checking on it. So after 24 hours, this was still very, very soft. I was leaving fingerprints and indentations when I tapped on the top of it. But after 48 hours, it was hard enough for me to unmold. Now I'm going to turn everything out carefully. And this does need a long curing time, similar to the Bastille soap. You're going to want to cure this for at least 3 weeks. Longer is better, just for purposes of getting a harder bar and having it last longer in the shower. But after 3 weeks, you're good to go if you want to start using it. So this is a great recipe for a beginner, for someone who doesn't want to buy a lot of different oils or just hates working with them, doing all the measuring. I still prefer my favorite recipe, which is a video that I will link for you up in the cards. That's still my favorite recipe. It has great lather. It's kind of like the perfect blend of everything, but there's a lot of oils in that recipe. And if that just seems like too much work to you, then sometimes it seems like too much work to me. This is a really good alternative. So if you look down in the description box, I will it will type out the whole recipe, and then I will also leave a link to my blog where you can go and print a paper copy for yourself. And I'll also leave links for some of the supplies that I used. And that is it. I hope you make this soap. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you appreciate how easy and simple it is. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.